October 2022, the damp, cold air enveloped the records archive of the Greater Manchester Police in England, a place holding tens of thousands of old, dust-covered files. The beam from technician David Chen's torch swept across rows of rusted steel shells, pausing on a dark, weathered cardboard box labeled SC/74/218-B. He whispered into his radio, "Control, I need to log this file. The seal is still intact." His voice echoed in the silent space amid the smell of old paper and rusted metal. What began as a routine inventory for a digitization project turned into an unexpected turning point. Something had been awakened after nearly half a century of dormancy. Inside the box were pieces of evidence once deemed insignificant: a piece of light-colored fabric, a silver earring, and a few faded black and white photos. These were the last items collected in the summer of 1974, the summer when Eleanor Vance, a 19-year-old girl, vanished while heading to work in Salford. For nearly half a century, Ellie's disappearance was just a faint crack in the city's memory. A thin file sat in a metal cabinet, stamped inactive. A forgotten name, a family left without answers. That July, Manchester sweltered under an unusual heat wave. The morning Ellie left home, her mother vividly recalled the soft click of the door and her daughter's final smile. She never made it to the laundrette, and no one saw her afterward. Only the piece of light-colored fabric, found near a canal towpath, and the lone earring her mother instantly recognized remained. No body, no witnesses, no trace. Before continuing this haunting story, take a second to hit subscribe and like this video. Your support helps bring these forgotten cases back into the light, so those silenced for decades can speak again. The discovery in the Manchester archive was more than just finding an old box of files. It was the starting point for a chain of events that would unearth secrets buried deep beneath English soil. Because when authorities finally identified a suspect in 2022, it wasn't a stranger, not a drifter, not a faceless shadow. It was a man questioned during the original 1974 investigation, then released, living among the community for decades as if nothing had happened. The Eleanor Vance case is not just a mystery solved. It is a testament to a city's refusal to forget its victims, to the power of forensic science and DNA technology, and to the people who believe that justice, though delayed, can still return. When Ellie disappeared, fear spread through Salford like wildfire on parched ground. Neighbors grew suspicious of one another. Families locked their doors. The search for the young girl revealed deep cracks in a community that seemed peaceful. Those cracks would explode when the truth finally emerged after 48 years. What makes this case particularly haunting is that the answers were always so close, in the police force's own storage, in a dusty car in a Bolton suburban garage, and in the DNA of a man who thought he'd escaped his past. A man who still went to the market, attended church, chatted with neighbors, carrying Manchester's darkest secret. Tonight we return to 1974, tracing the steps of a disappearance that shook an entire city, and exploring how an old piece of fabric could change the history of British criminal investigations. This is a story of loss, perseverance, deception, and justice delayed but never denied. Manchester, England, summer of 1974. The stifling air blanketed the Salford neighborhood, where rows of terraced brick houses lined cobbled side streets, and the hum of transistor radios played chart-topping pop hits mixed with the clatter of old fans. The morning began like any other, with early sunlight streaming through net curtains in the small Vance family home. Eleanor Vance, 19 years old, was getting ready for her morning shift at the Salford Steam Laundrette on Chapel Street. She was the only one living with her mother, a woman who worked at a nearby bakery. Ellie slipped on a white blouse, tied her hair back with a ribbon, and tucked a packed lunch prepared by her mother into her bag. Before leaving, she paused at the door, looking out at the sunlit street where old Ford Cortinas and Vauxhall Vivas crawled through the heat rising from the tarmac. Her mother, from the kitchen, called out something, but Ellie only smiled, then stepped out, her shoes tapping lightly on the pavement. Neighbors saw her, nodded in greeting, and then her figure faded behind the row of houses along the road, blending into the quiet rhythm of a Manchester morning. Time passed slowly. By noon, a warm breeze and fine dust swirled through the neighborhood, the sky turning hazy. When her mother returned from work, Ellie's bicycle was still propped against the wall, her room as tidy as it had been that morning. The mother sat waiting, glancing at the clock, waiting longer, until the sun sank behind the low rooftops. Ellie hadn't returned. The house phone was picked up repeatedly. Calls to the laundrette, to old school friends, to Ellie's former employer. No one knew where she was. As dusk settled, the neighborhood dimmed under faint yellow streetlights, and a sense of unease spread like thin smoke. The mother opened the door, stepped onto the porch, and stared at the empty street, clutching a photo of her daughter. The wind rustled through the trees, leaves whispering. No sound of cars, no sign she'd return. As the clock neared midnight, she went back inside and sat by the phone. The small room was lit only by a desk lamp, the steady tick of the second hand cutting through the thick air of worry. After a moment's hesitation, she took a deep breath and dialed. On the other end, the phone at the Salford police station rang in the quiet night. The officer on duty, a young rookie, jotted down the mother's frantic account before transferring the call to a superior. Within half an hour, a patrol car was dispatched to the small neighborhood where the Vance family lived. 2 constables stepped into the lit-up house where the mother waited in her work clothes, still dusted with flour from the bakery. On the table was an old photo of Ellie, a brown-haired girl with a round face and bright eyes. They asked basic questions. How tall was Ellie? What was her build? What did she usually wear? Did she have a boyfriend? The mother answered slowly, her voice hoarse with worry. She said her daughter was gentle, came straight home from work, only went to church on weekends, and never left without telling her. One constable took notes, his pen moving mechanically. A missing person report was opened that night, temporarily coded SC/74/218-B. A number meaningless to them then, but one that would echo for decades. The next morning, 2 detectives were assigned to the case. They visited the Vance home, walked through Ellie's small room, checked her wardrobe, her desk, searching for signs she might have planned to leave. No letters, no suitcase, nothing but a few notebooks, a small radio, and a wall calendar marked with her work shifts for the next week. Everything suggested she hadn't prepared to disappear. A neighbor was called in, confirming they saw Ellie leave the house the morning as usual, bag in hand. No one in the neighborhood heard screams or any disturbance. When the detectives asked about a boyfriend, the mother shook her head. She dated a boy from church, but they broke up last spring. No one else. In the initial report, police noted no signs of forced entry, no missing personal items, likelihood of voluntary departure low. Still, they held the theory she might have gone off with friends, as missing young adults were often assumed to leave willingly at the time. That afternoon, another detective visited the Salford steam laundrette. The owner confirmed Ellie was scheduled for the morning shift, but never arrived. No one in the area recalled her that day. After checking local hospitals and finding no record of her, police filed an internal report recommending further checks on her usual route to work. A map of Salford was spread out on a table in the small missing persons unit's meeting room. A red ink line was drawn from the Vance house to the laundrette, less than 2 miles. They marked points to check: the petrol station on the corner, a small cafe on Chapel Street, and an empty lot where kids played football. 2 officers were assigned to canvass those spots the next morning. Before leaving, one of the team whispered to a colleague, maybe she just took off for a few days. But the mother stayed awake in the house, unable to sleep. Every passing car made her look up, hoping her daughter would walk through the door. As dawn broke, she had sat motionless all night, Ellie's photo still in her hands. On the second morning after her disappearance, a preliminary report was sent to Greater Manchester Police, and the case was officially handed
to the city's Missing Persons Unit. In the department's dense paperwork, Eleanor Vance's name was added to the list of those yet to return. No one in that room knew this would mark the start of a case spanning nearly half a century. The next morning, Salford was still quiet as the first patrol cars rolled slowly through its narrow streets. Police began an official search, coordinating with dozens of volunteers and firefighters. They divided the area into small grids on the map, numbered in red ink, and searched in groups. Men from the neighborhood brought torches, shovels, and ropes.
Women brought flasks of tea and sandwiches for the searchers. They started on Chapel Street, Ellie's usual route, then fanned out around the brick houses, vacant lots, and old canal towpaths behind the neighborhood. The atmosphere was both urgent and heavy. The July heat soaked their shirts, dust caked their shoes, but everyone worked in silence, broken only by occasional calls echoing from a distance. In a brief meeting at a makeshift police post, the detective inspector in charge announced no direct witnesses had seen Ellie after she left home. A few people reported seeing a young girl in a light-colored shirt on Chapel Street that morning, but no one could confirm her face. A lorry driver mentioned a dark-colored car stopped by the roadside, but couldn't recall the number plate. Statements were logged, filed under needs verification. On the first day, searchers found only unrelated items: a crisp packet, an old bus ticket, an empty bottle of pop. Nothing of value. By afternoon, rain fell, soaking the streets and washing away any potential traces. On the second day, police shifted the search to the industrial outskirts of Salford, an area with more vacant lots and old warehouses. They used scent dogs along the canals leading to the River Irwell, but found nothing. No human scent, no personal items. Flyers with Ellie's picture were posted in shops, petrol stations, and churches. The local paper ran a brief notice: police investigate disappearance of a young woman in Salford. In the temporary meeting room of the Missing Persons Unit, the city map grew cluttered with red marks, indicated searched areas. A young officer stared at the map and muttered, "If it was an accident, we'd have found her by now." The commander didn't respond. He knew it. Cases like this in Manchester often ended in silence. But there was still hope, as nothing confirmed Ellie had left the area. On the afternoon of the third day of the search, with the exhausted search team regrouped at the end of Chapel Street, a hot, dry wind carried the smell of diesel and tarmac. A man with binoculars reported seeing something shiny in a ditch. Police checked, but it was just a piece of metal reflecting sunlight. Nothing. An older officer closed his notebook, whispering to a colleague that if no trace was found today, the chances of finding her alive were slim. That night, the search team pulled back, leaving 2 patrol cars to circle the area. The Manchester sky was thick with clouds, moonless. Car headlights reflected off wet streets, glinting on iron fences and old billboards. In the small Salford house, the mother sat by a cracked open window, listening to distant sirens. At the station, file SC/74/218B was updated with a few lines. 3 days post-disappearance, no definitive trace. Witness accounts inconsistent. The next morning, superiors approved expanding the search to nearby neighborhoods, including the industrial west side with old warehouses and abandoned lots. A small team was sent to check petrol stations and repair shops, asking if anyone recalled a young woman passing through. Every answer was the same. Don't know, don't remember, never saw her. Manchester remained loud and sunlit as always, but to the police, every road now seemed to lead to nowhere. The final pages of the third day's report held only a brief note. Search expanded, no new findings. On the morning of the fourth day of the search, with the sun not yet harsh, a group of constables and 2 local volunteers continued combing a vacant lot on the southern edge of Salford, near a road leading to a small motorway. The area was rarely visited, covered with knee-high weeds and a few old trees casting shadows on cracked, dry ground. While walking along a shallow ditch, an officer named Robert Finch bent down, noticing something unusual. A piece of light-colored fabric caught on a blade of grass, one end frayed and caked with dried mud. A few steps away, the ground showed clear tire tracks veering slightly toward the ditch. He radioed the team leader. The group quickly cordoned off a 10-meter radius, marking the scene with wooden stakes and nylon tape. A crime scene technician arrived with a camera and evidence collection kit. They carefully photographed the area, measured the distance between the fabric and tire tracks, and noted it in the report. The tire size suggested a mid-size saloon car, common in those years. Nearby, some grass blades were broken, slanting toward the ditch, as if someone had slipped or been dragged. Everything was photographed, labeled, and placed in evidence bags. The light-colored fabric, after a preliminary rinse with distilled water, revealed a dark brown stain resembling old blood. The technician noted it, but determining the blood type required sending the sample to the Greater Manchester Police's lab, with results taking days. As the team left the scene, the commander stood looking at the empty lot, noon sunlight casting patchy golden hues. He knew they might be standing where Ellie Vance met her fate. That afternoon, a preliminary report was sent to the department. The summary read, "Evidence includes light-colored fabric with brown stain, saloon tire tracks, possibly related to the disappearance. Recommend detailed analysis." Black and white photos were developed in the darkroom and pinned to the caseboard. Under a microscope, the technician noted the fabric was a cotton-nylon blend, common in women's clothing. An officer remarked quietly that Ellie often wore a white blouse to work, but it was still just speculation. No other clues provided clarity. The surrounding area was searched again thoroughly. They checked drainage pipes and under bushes, finding only old newspaper scraps and bottles, nothing of Ellie's. No body, no handbag, no personal items. Another team of detectives revisited nearby houses, asking about strange noises at night. Most said they heard nothing. An older man vaguely recalled a loud car engine one morning around the time Ellie vanished, but he wasn't sure which day. The information was fragmented, lacking substance. That evening, when the full report reached the desk of the detective inspector in charge, he read each line, signed it, and added a brief note. This may be the primary scene, possible assault or forced removal. The terse words marked a turning point in case SC/74/218B. By the end of the week, an internal meeting was called at GMP headquarters. Team leaders agreed to reclassify the case from adult missing person to suspected abduction. The reason noted in the minutes: physical evidence suggests external interference and the likelihood of the victim being forcibly removed from the scene. This change allowed broader investigative powers, and the case was temporarily assigned to the Major Crimes Unit for collaboration.
Copies of the report and crime scene photos were sent to the city's criminalistics unit for further analysis. A few days later, preliminary blood analysis confirmed it was human, type O. Ellie's family was informed of the development. The mother said nothing, only clutched the printed report, staring at the words, possible abduction. At the station, younger officers began to sense this was no longer a simple missing person case. But despite the first lead, every investigative path faced a void. No direct witnesses, no number plate, no clear sign of who interacted with Ellie that morning. The case was officially updated in the file. Its status changed to abduction, under investigation. On the investigation room's pinboard, next to Eleanor Vance's name, a scribbled note appeared. Re-examine Salford Keys area, possible local suspect. In Manchester, the summer heat lingered, but in the windowless police department room, no one felt its warmth. A strange silence settled, as if the city was hiding something that had slipped past everyone's notice. The next morning, when the first evidence report came back, the team shifted focus. A list of persons of interest was drawn up, people present around Chapel Street the morning Ellie vanished, especially those who worked, lived, or frequently passed through. On the map, they marked 5 locations: the petrol station, a nearby repair shop, a utility site under maintenance, a small transport company depot, and the vacant lot where the fabric was found. From this, 3 names stood out for initial questioning. Jeffrey Price, a delivery driver for a city center food company. Stanley Croft, the petrol station worker with a vague prior statement. And Arthur Finch, a utility technician working on power lines near Chapel Street. The following Monday morning, detectives met Jeffrey Price at the depot where he worked. Jeffrey, about 30, tall and thin, spoke softly. He remembered that morning because his delivery lorry was delayed by traffic near Chapel Street. He said he didn't see any girl resembling Ellie and didn't stop in Salford that day. His schedule was cross-checked with delivery receipts signed in the city center during the time Ellie left home. Still, police collected fabric samples from his lorry seats
as standard procedure and let him go. Stanley Croft, the petrol station worker, was summoned again. He stuck to his story. That morning, he saw a young girl in a light shirt near the curb, seemingly talking to someone in a car, but couldn't recall the driver's face or number plate. Pressed further, he added the car was dark, possibly blue or gray, resembling a common saloon. He insisted he saw no coercion and was busy with customers afterward. When asked about customers that morning, Stanley provided a handwritten fuel payment list. One name stood out: A. Finch, Northwest Electricity Board. This caught the detectives' attention. They visited the utility company's office in the Trafford Park Industrial Estate where Arthur Finch worked. Personnel records showed Finch, 26, was assigned to maintain power lines along Chapel Street the day Ellie disappeared. He had no serious criminal record, only a minor fine for a pub disturbance. Police contacted Finch to come to the station. He arrived that afternoon, wearing a blue shirt, speaking slowly, and appearing cooperative. He said he drove a company vehicle to the worksite that morning, but left before 9 a.m. for another job in South Manchester. Asked if he spoke to any young women, Finch said he didn't recall. Police inspected his vehicle, an old dark blue Ford Cortina with a company logo. Inside were only work tools, a toolbox, wire coils, and engine oil. A technician collected samples from the floor mats and seats for blood analysis, per protocol. Finch remained calm, even joking, "I didn't think I'd end up a suspect in a teledrama." He signed a voluntary cooperation statement before leaving. That evening, Detective Chief Inspector George Hobbs noted in the file, "Finch's time and location align with the victim's disappearance, but no direct evidence. Continue passive monitoring." 3 days later, preliminary lab results showed the fabric and car mat samples didn't match the evidence fabric. The car mat blood was type A, not the type O from the scene. The The report's final note concluded, insufficient grounds for charges. Police re-examined Jeffrey Price and others on the list. All had solid alibis. The fragmented clues were filed away, none connecting to the disappearance. The case shifted to open investigation, monitored but without specific action. In the following weeks, police occasionally revisited Salford, questioned more residents, checked reports of suspicious vehicles, but found nothing new. Autumn arrived, the weather cooled, the summer heat faded, but Ellie Vance's file sat on the desk, gathering a thin layer of dust. Arthur Finch's name remained on the suspect list, lightly crossed with pencil, not erased. No one in the unit imagined he'd reappear in this case decades later, when all seemed forgotten. But for now, to Greater Manchester Police, Ellie's disappearance was just one of hundreds of unsolved cases awaiting evidence they couldn't find. By late July, as the case entered its third week, Greater Manchester Police decided to expand the search. Commanders reasoned that if Ellie was taken from Salford, she might have been abandoned in a more complex terrain outside the city. A plan to thoroughly search the area along the River Irwell, a long, winding river running through Manchester, was approved. Many prior missing person cases had ended here, where tall reeds grew and murky water flowed silently between eroded banks. On the morning of the operation, police, firefighters, and canine units lined up along the riverbank, equipped with ropes, torches, and maps. From above, a GMP helicopter circled slowly, recording aerial footage to identify suspicious areas. Teams moved in a horizontal line, spaced a few meters apart, scanning every patch of grass, mound of dirt, and rocky crevice. The English sun blazed, but no one stopped. After nearly 2 hours, a police dog barked frantically near a low-lying area by an abandoned wooden bridge. Officers rushed over. Under dry grass, they saw a small glint, a silver teardrop earring, tarnished and dusty, lying alone. A technician knelt, gloved, and used tweezers to place it in a clear nylon bag labeled Evidence 014. A photo taken on site was attached to that afternoon's report. When Ellie's mother was called to identify it, she recognized it immediately. It was part of the pair Ellie wore that final day. She said she'd bought them for Ellie's 18th birthday, items her daughter rarely removed. The technician's report noted briefly, "Evidence confirmed as victim's property." Those words made the atmosphere in the police meeting room heavier than ever. In missing person cases, when personal items appear scattered, hope of survival fades. Still, the search continued for days. Teams scoured the river, moving in segments of a few hundred meters, using iron hooks to drag the water and digging soft earth. A few other items surfaced, an old plastic piece, a dark fabric scrap, but analysis showed they were unrelated. At night, they lit field lamps to scan the water, seeing only tree shadows reflected on the still surface. Throughout, the dogs detected no scent matching Ellie's clothing provided by her mother. All efforts led to nothing. The local press ran a short article about the search, with a photo of police by the river, captioned, "Efforts continue." Residents began speculating. Some said the girl was taken far from the city, others that she fell into the water and was swept away. But police released no further details. All remained conjecture. On the 10th day, the search team leader proposed ending the operation. They had covered over 3 miles along the river, with no unchecked suspicious areas. The final report's last line read, "No further traces or body found. Search paused. Case moves to next investigative phase." The silver earring was stored in the Greater Manchester Police's evidence locker alongside the earlier light-colored fabric. The numbered nylon bags, labeled with marker, were neatly packed in a steel box, locked and sealed. In the Vance family's small home, the mother sat silently at the table, with the matching earring in her hand, glinting under the dim yellow lamp. Across the city, The investigation room dimmed its lights, leaving only the glow on the caseboard. On the map, the River Irwell was crossed out, marked Searched. Beyond the earring, they found nothing. And as the final report lines were signed, the search officially ended after over 10 days of fruitless effort. Manchester continued its humid days, but in case SC 74-218B, a new page had just been turned. Yet all traces fell silent once more. In early September, after the River Irwell search ended, the Salford Investigation Office still received sporadic calls. An anonymous man claimed he saw a girl resembling Ellie at a bus station on the outskirts of Bolton with an older man. When police checked, the station was empty and no one recognized the description. Another woman from a different district insisted Ellie had visited her corner shop the previous week. But when shown a photo, she shook her head saying, "Maybe I was mistaken." Each lead flickered and faded, like faint glimmers in the dark, none clear enough to pursue. The investigators compiled all information, marking leads for further verification. Perhaps Ellie left the city with someone she knew, or was lured by a stranger. But both theories lacked foundation. No financial traces, no communication, no witnesses saw her after that morning. Detectives visited every mentioned location, from the small cafe on Chapel Street to an old lorry park, finding only empty land and people with no specific recollections. They added brief notes to the already thick file. Typed lines sprawled across white spaces. No progress. No new verification results. No suspect vehicle identified. Every effort looped back to the same meaningless cycle. A month later, DCI Hobbs called a brief meeting in the small room behind the station. He reviewed the evidence list, the fabric, the earring, tire tracks, a few crime scene photos. All remained mute. Blood analysis confirmed the stain on the fabric was type O, matching millions, useless for identification. No fingerprints, no DNA, then a foreign concept. He leaned back, silent for a long moment, then said, "We're holding a case with no scene, no witnesses, no suspects." A young officer spoke up. "What about Finch? He's still on the watch list." Hobbs nodded but replied, "We can't hold someone on a hunch." Days later, they rechecked Finch's work schedule with the utility company. Everything aligned. Colleagues confirmed he left the site on time. Police could only add a note to the file. No new suspicious behavior. Meanwhile, the department took on other cases: burglaries, assaults, missing minors, all demanding manpower. Thin staffing and limited funding pushed Ellie's case to low priority. Part of the team shifted to a city center armed robbery investigation. File SC 74-218B sat in a steel cabinet, opened only occasionally for vague tips.
Perhaps because it started so simply and ended too soon. When the room's lights went out, file SC-74-218B was placed in storage, nestled among dozens of other unsolved cases. Across the city, Manchester's first winter arrived, cold and damp, erasing lingering traces on the ground, and with them, any clues someone had missed. In early 1975, as new cases piled up at Greater Manchester Police, Eleanor Vance's disappearance was officially marked inactive. An internal memo directed all related documents, reports, and evidence to be transferred to the GMP Central Storage Facility. On a cold morning, 2 young constables carried a sturdy cardboard box containing the case's entirety: maps, crime scene photos, interrogation reports, and a few small evidence bags. The nylon bags had yellowed, labeled in red ink. The light-colored fabric and silver earring were sealed tightly in thick folders marked Exhibit A and Exhibit B. The box was labeled in bold print, SC-74-218B, Missing Person, Vance, Eleanor. When the storage clerk received it, he assigned a new file number, GMP-ARC-74-1142. The box was placed on a steel shelf among hundreds of others in a windowless concrete room in the basement of the force headquarters. No one said anything more. It was a routine handoff in the daily administrative process. From that moment, Ellie Vance's file entered the official silence of the storage system, a world of paper, stamps, and cold codes. For years, no one mentioned it. DCI Hobbs retired. The young investigators moved to other units. Newer, thicker, more urgent files filled the cabinets, pushing older cases lower in the system. When GMP's file management shifted to computers in the 1980s, the Vance case wasn't digitized. No conviction, no suspect, no body. Her name existed only on the cover of an old paper file, its glued edges peeling. The GMP storage was a long, damp, cold concrete warehouse near the northern industrial area, the smell of old paper mixed with metal dust and machine oil. Along the corridors, thousands of boxes were stacked, each with a unique code and colored label. Among them, GMP-ARC-74-1142 was unremarkable, a small code in a sea of data. Each year, clerks performed an inventory, noting, "File intact, no request to reopen." Sometimes dust from the ceiling settled, leaving a gray film on the box's lid. Once, after a major storm, nearby files were water damaged, but GMP-ARC-74-1142 remained intact, safe in the middle row. No one knew, no one cared. The 1980s passed, then the 1990s. Manchester changed, skyscrapers rose, the city was rebuilt. New cases dominated headlines. Names in the storage faded from the memories of those who worked on them. Occasionally, a new clerk passed the shelf, saw SC-74-218B, and assumed it was an unimportant missing person case. No one opened it, no one asked. In the dim room, only the steady hum of ventilation fans and the smell of aging paper marked the years. Box GMP-ARC-74-1142 stood still for nearly half a century, witnessing countless staff come and go, surrounded by newer files. Everything of Eleanor Vance, the fabric, the earring, black and white photos of broken grass, remained inside, waiting for someone, at some distant moment, to stumble upon it. But in 1975, when the final report was stamped archived, no one at Greater Manchester Police thought the case had a chance to be reopened. To them, it was over, not with answers, but with the absolute silence of paper and dust. In the 1980s, as Manchester entered a boom, the police force evolved. The storage system was upgraded, and old cases were reviewed for classification. Among thousands of files, case SC-74-218B remained in the unsolved inactive category. A young sergeant tasked with reviewing pre-1980 missing person cases skimmed Eleanor Vance's name, noting, "No body, no suspect, insufficient grounds for reinvestigation," then moved on. The box stayed in place among rows of faded steel shelves. Each inventory, it was wiped down, marked intact, and returned to silence. Occasionally, a rookie curious about old missing person cases opened the catalog and saw her name, but only read a dry description. Female, 19, missing July 1974, not found. No one recalled details. The original investigators had retired, passed away, or moved. Fragmented memories of the case faded with them. In the early 1990s, as GMP adopted microfilm storage to save space, clerks were sent to the archive to scan files. They placed Ellie's file on a lit table, flipping each page through the machine. Reports, crime scene photos, and DCI Hobbs's handwritten notes appeared on a black and white screen. After copying, the original was returned to the box, sealed, and untouched again. From then, Ellie's file existed only as a few thin film reels in a metal drawer, each labeled with a cold code, SC-74-218B, Vance E. Over the next 2 decades, her name surfaced briefly. In 1999, when GMP formed a cold case unit, officers reviewed unresolved missing person cases. They saw the Vance case, but quickly dismissed it. No body, no suspect, no testable evidence. It couldn't be reopened. An internal report noted victim status unverifiable, insufficient legal basis for criminal investigation. In 2005, a freelance journalist writing about Manchester's unresolved disappearances requested information. The police response was curt: "This case is inactive." Her article included a brief paragraph about a young girl named Ellie, missing since 1974. No one responded. No one recalled more. As DNA technology advanced, GMP revisited some old cases with preserved evidence, but the box wasn't considered. No one thought the fabric or earring held value after so long. In 2012, the archive was reorganized and reclassified. A clerk named Richard Barlow noted in the log, Box GMP-ARC-74-1142, good condition, no retrieval requests. He affixed a new label, updated the code to the current format, and returned it to its shelf. 10 more years passed. In 2020, the UK government launched a major project to digitize old criminal files from large constabularies, including GMP. The National Digital Archive Initiative aimed to upload all unaccessed data to a central electronic system for future DNA and genealogical analysis. Teams of technicians worked year-round in old archives, scanning files, labels, and boxes, updating digital catalogs. In the 2020 database, the entry GMP-ARC-74-1142, missing person, Was Eleanor, 1974, was added, recoded as UK GMP MP218B. From a dusty cardboard box, the case emerged from oblivion for the first time in nearly half a century, not because anyone remembered, but because an algorithm demanded scanning all undigitized data. When the project progress report was sent to headquarters, no one noticed the name. To them, it was just one of tens of thousands of old missing person files. But in the basement of the Manchester storage facility, the box was pulled from the shelf, placed on a lit table, and prepared for the next processing phase. The evidence inside, the fabric, the earring, the black and white photos of broken grass, was about to be seen again for the first time in 46 years. No one knew that from that moment, the wheels of the Eleanor Vance case began turning again, slowly but surely, toward a resolution the city thought time had buried. In October 2022, in the old warehouse where Greater Manchester Police stored tens of thousands of criminal files, technician David Chen was performing routine inventory for the data digitalization program. His work was tedious. Open each old file box, verify codes, note conditions, photograph labels, and reseal. The paper boxes were stacked to the ceiling with labels of all colors: robbery, assault, missing person, closed 1975, evidence retained. In the deepest corner of the 7th row, he found a dust-heavy box, its dirty brown cover marked in faded red ink, SC-74-218-B, Vance, E. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible. Chen put on gloves, pulled the box from the shelf, and checked the seal, still intact and unopened. The tape was frayed, but the red stamp was clear. He carefully untied the straps, photographed it with a digital camera, and placed the contents on the inventory table. Inside were 4 old nylon evidence bags, clouded with age. Each had a paper label attached with yellowed tape, handwritten in blue ink: Exhibit A, cloth fragment; Exhibit B, earring; Exhibit C, soil sample; and Exhibit D, tire print photos. There was also a thin file with original reports, a few photos printed from film, and a tight preliminary report from 1974. Chen examined each piece. The light-colored fabric, about 2 inches long, was intact but brittle. A dark brown stain, like dried blood, was visible on the edge. The small silver earring was wrapped in soft paper, sealed in its own nylon bag. He laid each item on an anti-static cloth, photographed them for the record, and filled out the evidence condition form. All were intact, with no significant damage. In his routine reports notes section, Chen wrote, "Preserved samples, suitable for modern DNA analysis." He used this phrase only for evidence likely to retain biological traces. That afternoon, he presented the report to the team leader. The leader skimmed it, nodded. "A missing person case from 1974. No body, right?" Chen confirmed. The leader paused, then said, "If there's blood, we could try DNA. The new project allows testing old samples for the database." For the first time in nearly half a century, Eleanor Vance's file was proposed for re-examination with biotechnology. An internal form was created in the system, coded UK-GMP-MP218B-R1, stating, "Request for DNA analysis, National Forensic Science Centre, London." 2 days later, Chen packed the evidence in a specialized secure box, accompanied by an electronic transfer receipt. The package was transported in a temperature-controlled vehicle to the Forensic Science Centre in London, which processes thousands of samples yearly from across the country. On the road, Chen glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing sunlight glinting off the sealed box in the back. To him, it was just another task, but a vague feeling prompted him to note in his personal log, "Case SC/74/218B, looks intact, old, but strangely preserved." In London, the samples were received by the lab's Biological Evidence Intake Unit. A technician signed off, noting the time and storage conditions. They opened the box in a clean room, using UV light to check for organic stains. The dark brown stain on the fabric reacted strongly, indicating human hemoglobin. The team split the fabric into 2 parts, one for touch DNA testing, the other preserved for reference. Under an electron microscope, the dried blood on the fabric retained intact protein structures, rare for a sample nearly 50 years old. A veteran technician remarked that this was likely due to the airtight manual storage of the 1970s. Those old nylon bags sometimes preserve better than expected. After 3 days of extraction and amplification, a genetic sequence appeared on the computer. A complete male DNA profile, coded with high reliability. The sample was entered into the UK National DNA Database, NDNAD, containing millions of DNA profiles from criminals, suspects, and missing persons across the UK. The server scanned for minutes, then returned, "No match found." This was common for old cases. Most individuals involved were never arrested, or their data wasn't in the system. Still, the team didn't stop. By 2022, the UK had partnered with commercial genealogy companies, allowing expanded searches into civilian DNA databases where millions voluntarily submitted samples for ancestry tracing. A technician named Laura Nguyen was assigned to transfer the Vance case data to a genealogy platform. She uploaded the profile, requesting matches for distant relatives with at least 15% genetic similarity. The system ran for 2 nights, filtering thousands of results, and on the 3rd morning, 3 names appeared on the screen, all surnamed Finch, one in Essex, one in Wales, and one in Lancashire. When Laura opened the demographic map, she saw the Finch family was concentrated in the Manchester area in the 1970s. Cross-referencing old local council records, residency, and work permits, she quickly found a striking match. Arthur Finch,
born 1947, a technician for the Northwest Electricity Board, the same name noted in the 1974 investigation. This discovery was immediately reported to the Greater Manchester Police Cold Case Division commander. A small emergency meeting was held online between the London tech team and Manchester investigators. The screen displayed a black-and-white photo of Finch from the old file, a sharp-featured face, evasive eyes, taken during a brief 1974 questioning. Below it was DCI Hobbs' note: Finch, utility worker, present in the area morning of July 2, 1974. Insufficient grounds for prosecution. The current investigation leader, Detective Inspector Kate Sharma, froze as she read the report. Born a decade after Ellie's disappearance, she had seen Finch's name while reviewing old suspect lists in the archive. Like others, she had dismissed it as a random name among hundreds cleared. Now, with the genealogy results, everything changed. The London lab expanded the analysis, tracing the Finch family tree back 4 generations, confirming the DNA likely belonged to a Manchester-based branch in the early 1970s. In that branch, only 2 adult males existed: Arthur Finch and his brother, deceased since 1991.
The genealogy report was sent to Manchester with the note, "High probability of direct paternal lineage match." Subject, Arthur Finch. In Manchester, D.I. Sharma immediately requested Arthur Finch's residency and driving license records. The system confirmed he was alive, living in Bolton, just over 15 miles from the original crime scene. She and her team gathered more details. Finch was retired, had 2 minor traffic violations, no criminal record. His wife, long deceased, no children. Living quietly, often tinkering with old cars in his backyard garage. A neighbor described him as barely talking to anyone, just pottering about and disappearing into that house. Sharma printed 2 photos, one from the 1974 file, one from his current license, and placed them side by side. Despite time's wrinkles, the bone structure, gaze, and a small scar by the right temple matched perfectly. She pinned both to the investigation board, connected by a red string, writing below, "Genetic match, pending confirmation." That night, in the dim glow of neon lights, Sharma stood before the board where Arthur Finch's name sat a middle web of red strings. Nearly half a century later, every path led back to one point. In November 2022, file SC/74/218-B was marked reopened in the GMP system. After decades in storage, Eleanor Vance's name reappeared on the active case list. The reinvestigation was assigned to the Cold Case Division, specializing in decades-old unsolved cases. Leading it was Detective Inspector Kate Sharma, a meticulous investigator known for solving complex genealogy cases. On the day she received the file, Sharma visited the old storage room at headquarters, a quiet space lined with hundreds of boxes. A technician handed her a sealed box labeled SC/74/218-B, Missing Person, Vance, E. She placed it on her desk, untied the straps, and opened it. Inside were yellowed documents, film-printed crime scene photos, and DCI George Hobbs's handwritten reports. There was the note, "Possible abduction, area Chapel Street." Sharma read everything, from the first report to the final archive entry. On her desk, dozens of pages spread out, mixed with faded black and white photos. The light fabric, tire tracks, broken grass, the silver earring. In the corner was Hobbs's faded signature, an echo from the past. She carefully pinned each photo to the board, numbered them, and arranged the timeline from Ellie leaving home to the search's end. It all spanned less than 2 weeks, then silence for 48 years. After 3 days of review, Sharma saw everything differently. The new DNA evidence from London had reshaped the investigation. The genealogy report pointed directly to the Finch family, and the old file named one. She found the 1974 interrogation report, 3 pages, hastily written. Finch, Arthur, utility worker. Stated left area before 9:00 a.m. No direct evidence. Hobbs's handwritten note mentioned a gray utility uniform and a Ford Cortina, registered to the Northwest Electricity Board. Sharma accessed the city's archived personnel records for the utility company. After hours, she found one entry: Arthur Finch, technician, 1968 to 1985, retired early. Last address in Bolton, 15 miles from Manchester. The pieces began to fit. To verify the old statement, Sharma met Stanley Croft, the 1974 petrol station worker, now over 80, living with his daughter in suburban Bury. When told police wanted to discuss the Eleanor Vance case, he went quiet, then said, "I thought they'd forgotten about that." Sharma opened a small notebook, showing him a crime scene photo and Finch's black-and-white picture. "Do you remember this man? You said you saw someone in a utility uniform talking to a girl that morning." Croft put on glasses, holding the photo close. He looked long, then nodded slightly. "The shirt's the same. Bright logo on the left chest, I remember that. The face, much older, but the build, the hair, it's that type. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's him." Sharma pressed, "Anything about the car?" He replied slowly, "4-door saloon, dark paint, dusty, the kind used for tools. I remember because it was parked right in front of the station, blocking the way." Croft's confirmation, though not absolute, strengthened the new lead. Sharma returned to the office, adding a note: "Witness Croft confirms Finch's presence at the scene morning of July 2, 1974, consistent with genealogy DNA data." She sent a summary to the Crown Prosecution Service, requesting to formally reopen the investigation with Arthur Finch, 75, of Bolton, Lancashire, as the suspect. A warrant for his financial, medical, and movement records was approved within 48 hours. The Cold Case Division's covert surveillance team began monitoring Finch's small home, a 1950s-style house in a quiet area with a detached garage. Neighbors described him as reclusive, rarely interacting, shopping only on weekends. Sharma requested a bin search for DNA. One morning, after the bin lorry left, technicians retrieved a teacup and an old toothbrush from Finch's bin. The samples were rushed to the London lab for comparison with the 1974 fabric DNA. Results returned in 4 days, a perfect match. The report was printed, stamped in red, and sent to the Manchester prosecutor with a request for a search warrant. The conclusion was typed in bold: "DNA match between 1974 evidence and suspect Arthur Finch confirmed, 99.98% probability." Sharma stood in her office reviewing the digitized file, from Hobbs's initial notes to the current lab report bridging half a century. She felt as if stepping into the void where Eleanor vanished. That night, she drove through old Salford, where scattered terraced houses remained. The narrow streets, yellow streetlights, and old trees seemed frozen in 1974. The next day, Sharma and 2 detectives